Hey everyone, welcome to this Matchpal webinar on the residency personal statement. We're going to be covering the foundation and structure of a strong personal statement, how to use AI to enhance your writing without losing your unique voice, and going through real life examples of changes you can make to make your personal statement stand out from the stack. We hope you enjoy.
So welcome to the personal statement webinar we do every year here at Matchpal. We're going to be talking about standing out from the stack. This is super timely as a lot of people are going into, finishing up MS3, jumping into dedicated, thinking about their ERAS and applications and personal statements. And we're just really excited to talk to you guys about things that, quite frankly, most medical schools do not provide a lot of key, deep insights on. And I think, at the end of this talk, you'll see most of the things that we talk about here are things that we wish we knew and that we've learned over the years in working with hundreds of students in helping them prepare for ERAS. And really proud to partner with Amboss to put this together for you guys. So yeah, let's jump right in. So we're going to be covering everything about personal statements, soup to nuts. So foundational stuff about why they matter. I think everyone here kind of knows about that, but we'll talk about some statistics there. We'll also talk about structure and strategy for both kind of starting off with a blank slate, the importance of openers and closers. We'll talk about using AI and any other tools available. I know that's a lot of questions that we got in the sign-up forms was about specifically about AI and red flags. So we definitely have a couple of slides to cover on that. We'll go through some live personal statement editing examples. So we're going to cover real excerpts that we've seen in our team of students that submitted their personal statements to us and the types of feedback that we would give. And we'll do a live Q&A at the end for you guys to have an opportunity to ask us any questions. And I'll be your host today. My name is Dan Vega. I'm a PGY4 interventional radiology resident in New York City. Also one of the co-founders of Matchpal. With me is my other co-founder, Ian. I'll give him a chance to introduce himself, and then we'll go off to Aska and Cameron.
Hey everyone, I'm Ian. Like Dan said, I'm a Matchpal mentor, one of the co-founders of Matchpal. I'm a radiology resident in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Really excited to talk to everyone about the personal statement.
Hi, I'm Aska. Sorry, my camera's not on. I have just finished sign out, so this is a little bit portable as the PGY2 life. I'm a PGY2 in internal medicine at Cleveland Clinic South Point. I'm really excited to be here and help you guys.
I'm Camry. I'm a family medicine attending now at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. I did residency here at Mayo Clinic in Rochester and was chief resident as well.
Yeah. So as you can see, we have a really diverse panel here as far as like specialties, backgrounds. I think I probably represent the more surgical side of things. Kind of a sort of IR being like a little bit more of a surgical subspecialty. We have an attendings perspective who's also a chief resident. We have two kind of senior residents who, went through the process and serve on their programs committees and work with a lot of students through Matchpal. So hopefully this is going to be helpful and applicable to everyone here, regardless of what specialty, what school you go to, and where you're at and what type of statement you're about to put together. All right, so I think the fundamental thing that I want to address first is that this is not your medical school personal statement, right? This is a statement that focuses on different things. So we have, the med school statement is talking about why you want to be a doctor, what kind of experiences you had to make this career choice. Are you mature enough to recognize that choice? And, if this is the right thing for you. And then residency is really all about, do you belong in this specialty? Do you have like actual substantial reasons for that? And then what experiences make you unique? And is that collective message the right fit for a specific program, right? So it's a different focus, and it's going to be something that we kind of hit on over and over again throughout this talk. And, PDs do take the personal statement seriously, right? So program director survey data shows that 3/4 of programs are actually using the personal statement for interview screening, and then up to half of them are using it in the final rank list. Now, I can tell you this personal statement is weighted at my program. I know it's weighted at other programs in IR for sure. It's very important for especially a lot of the surgical subspecialties in general, because they want to know that you're not just kind of going after the generic reasons for wanting to do a field. You have like actual experience and you've had substantial kind of involvement in the field, and you're able to eloquently kind of talk about that. Now, I don't know if, maybe Cameron, you want to chime in on, from your perspective, from chief resident perspective, now attending, like, how accurate would you say these numbers are? Maybe let's start with that.
Yeah, I think these numbers are very accurate. I think in family medicine and in my program, a big thing that we were looking at was also are you, like, what characteristics do you bring to our program that are different than all of these other applicants? And so kind of selling yourself a little bit within your personal statement can be helpful, because as we all know, everyone is highly qualified and really impressive. So trying to find something unique that you bring to their table.
Yeah, absolutely. And as important as the personal statement ranking is for like interview selection and ranking, it's still going to be very challenging to impress someone, because the same way everyone is super impressive with their scores and their research and everything else, is it's similar how easy it is to blend in with your personal statement. And I think I once heard this kind of adage by actually my current program director, and he said this exactly. He literally said, and this was when I was a fourth year medical student, he said, 80% of personal statements sound the same. They literally sound the same. They don't move the needle at all. They're not going to help me make my decision to interview or rank someone, right? 10% of personal statements completely destroy someone's chances, because they were otherwise so good, and then now their statement just like sucks, and now I don't really care to like get to know them or rank them. And the other 10% of statements are excellent. They make up for other glaring deficiencies in the application, whether it be in research or scores or otherwise, right? And the goal of getting you guys, at the end of this talk, is to be in that top 10%, right? That's what we want. We want you guys to be able to put together statements that actually stand out and leave those kinds of impressions on people where you're really distinguishing yourself from everyone else. So what is the structure, right? Now, I can't emphasize the hook enough. We have actually multiple slides to cover it, but I think the hook is really it's the beginning, right? You have to, when the eyes land at the top left corner of the screen, reading that statement for the first time, am I in, or am I rolling my eyes and going next, right? It's so important to have a good, compelling story that kind of sets the stage for everything else, right? And then weaving into the hook, right, or building off of the hook, you want to have relevant examples through clinical or extracurricular or personal experiences that actually explain, show but don't tell the reason why you're applying to this specialty and why you're a good fit and better than someone else with a similar score, similar research portfolio, et cetera. I think having a common theme throughout is one thing that we are changing tons here when we're doing our edits with students, right? A lot of times people are writing 4 paragraphs, and they might have a lot of good elements. Like there's a good hook, the messaging is solid, but they're like discontinuous. Like each paragraph is like its own thing, and there's no thread between them. It's like 4 mini personal statements thrown on one page, right? And then there's the payoff at the end, which is really kind of tied to the thread, in that you want to tie in the message together, bring the reader back to the beginning, right? Make me, by reading your last paragraph, like remind me of all of the highlights that I was supposed to take away from the first 2 or 3 paragraphs that you wrote, and leave me with like that good taste in my mouth of like, all right, that was good. I like this person. I want to get to know them. All right. 1 page max. I think everybody knows that rule, hopefully. But yeah, really do not exceed a page. If you think that you are unable to cut anymore, I can promise you, send that statement to us. We will find probably 30% of it that we can trim out. Every single word needs to like earn its place. Like there should be no fat, no fluff. You should never be repeating yourself. You should never have any of that kind of excessive verbiage that like has the potential to lose the reader or sound like duplicative. Like there's no room for that, right? We want to have like every single word needs to be high yield. All right, so the hook. Now, here's an example. This is not a real like editing example. This is just like an example of a generic bad hook. And I think, I see Camry and Ian smiling because we've read a lot of statements that start with a hook like this, not too far off, right? It's about the family member or whatever, and it's just kind of, it's not interesting, right? Like we're in medicine, we know like everyone has illnesses. Everyone probably has seen a family member go through an illness. I think the only time illnesses are like worth mentioning is like when it happens to yourself. Like that was another thing that I picked up over the years is like, we all have a grandparent. Like we're all like 25 to 35 years old. Our parents are getting older. Our grandparents are either deceased or really old, right? That's the circle of life, and that's okay. But having a story like that doesn't really make things super compelling, right? Because we all have them, right? And yes, your family member is important to you, but like so is everyone else's, right? So if it doesn't happen to you, it becomes a lot less of a compelling story when you talk about like specifically medical illnesses as being like a source of inspiration to pursue the doctor job. I think, I'll kind of kick the can to Ian. What are some examples of hooks that you think are, maybe what a student might perceive as like being out there, but actually can be super interesting when you're reading statements to whether it's for your program or for Matchpal?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll just say, there are certain scenarios in which someone having an illness maybe could be an okay story. I'm thinking of my kind of friend and fellow Matchpal mentor who is a neurology resident, and his wife and like longtime girlfriend was diagnosed with MS as they were going through medical school, and that really influenced his specialty choice. And that's like a true like excellent story where it's like, okay, that is something that's actually unique. So there are cases, usually pretty rare, where maybe an illness to a loved one could be a good story, but that's of course a specialty specific example. A lot of examples that you see that really work well are going to be examples where a person is kind of telling a story in that first sentence. The story maybe is talking about an element of their life. Maybe it's talking about, it could be a clinical vignette that really shows like a characteristic, a specific aspect of themselves that like shows that they really fit that specialty, or are really interested in that specialty. And you might kind of get like scared hearing some of this stuff, like, oh, you need a really good hook. I don't have that interesting of a life. Like, I don't have that great of a story. It honestly doesn't really matter that much. It's more just about having a story that everyone can relate to, see the characteristic you're trying to paint, see the scenario you're trying to paint, and like find it interesting. I think any like clinical vignette could be like a good start for a hook. Any like instance of you overcoming an obstacle of your life could be a good start of a hook. It's all about kind of how you spin it and how, like, honestly, how good of a job you're writing about it.
Exactly. No, I totally agree. I mean, Oscar, I don't know, you or Camry, if you want to add anything to the hook or share some hooks that you've seen work or not work.
I would say a lot of the things that I've seen are just like emotional moments, maybe like people have experienced in their past work life. Like one girl's personal statement that I edited, she was working as like an ER tech and she was getting somebody's vitals and they started coding. That was her opening. And she doesn't even want to do emergency medicine. It was IM. And so we were able to transition that because it just kind of ignited that flame of wanting to do medicine. And that's the type of hook you want to use because as they mentioned, 90 seconds. And at my program, oftentimes when we were reviewing candidates, we would pull up their personal statements again. So it's a reference and it really reinforces like who the person is. So it's a snapshot of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the real thing is like it's not even about the topic, it's about putting the reader in the moment, right? Make me feel something like suspense, anger, like give me like trigger some sort of emotion in me when I read that like first line or two. And I think that's going to hook most people, regardless of what the actual substance is, whether it's clinical or not, personal or kind of something that you found inspiring. I've seen statements go off of like quotes about yoga, and I'm like, okay, that's where is this going? Like, I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't even have to be medical related, but it was interesting. It was different. It was something that got me reading more. I want to know more. So I think that's kind of the takeaway here. And I think Ian touched upon this before, right? Like most of us don't have that dramatic of a story of why we wanted to do this specific thing, right? You're allowed to just be interested in the specialty because it's a really cool specialty and you think this is the best fit for you. Like that's totally reasonable. You just have to put in work in providing a unique angle into how you say it. That's really all it comes down to. And that's where having time to revise and sit on your writing and iterating on it and getting tons of eyes on it and going through like edits, that's where that comes into play is versus just throwing together something on a page and being like, all right, this is the best I got, and then just like hitting submit, right? And I think, yeah, I think we covered most of this. I don't know, Cameron, if you want to add anything else here.
I don't think I have anything to add. I think one thing that we've been saying, and maybe a different way to frame it, is you can lose me in the first few sentences and I will be bored for however long I pretend to read the rest of the personal statement. Or if you hook me, you can kind of course, don't do this, but like the personal statement can get worse and worse, but I will read the whole thing. And so I think just really spending a lot of time on that first paragraph or two, because I'll likely hang with it because you really got my attention right away. It's really hard to regain my attention at like paragraph 2 or 3 because I'm likely glossing over it anyways.
Yeah, I totally agree. All right. I know we have a lot of people that wanted to know about various red flags. And there's a lot of different red flags that can come up. And this probably doesn't apply to most of you, but just to kind of get it out there and address it, right? Typically, we tell students to talk about if board exam failures comes up, or shelf failures or anything, or course failures, right? Typically, don't put into the statement, leave that into there's like an additional comment section, use that for that purpose. Leaves of absence and like repeating a year, I think that's substantial. I think that's worth addressing directly and head on. Your whole statement should not be about it. This is like a maximum 1 paragraph situation, but worth putting in. I think anyone who has like a non-traditional path or a gap year inside of medicine that was like intentional, right? So meaning this is not like an academic, you failed a course or whatever. This is more like I took a research year, I did a teaching year, I did a year abroad, whatever it is. Or you had like some non-clinical career or even a clinical career before you went to med school. That's like really compelling. Like all that stuff should absolutely be woven in to some part of your personal statement. And then definitely do not ever talk about like being a lower scorer. And that might apply to a lot of people, right? A lot of people are going to be applying to a specialty where their score is not at the mean or above of the match score for that specialty or program. And that's okay, right? Don't forget, it's a mean, right? 50% of people are going to have lower. Don't cause don't start like making it more of a big deal than it actually is. And then I know we also have a lot of different types of students here today. We have MDs, we have DOs, we have MGs. I think the fundamental thing here is you don't need to frame anything as a disadvantage. Definitely never do that. And I think there are unique ways, depending on which specialty you're going into and what type of background you have, to make these positives. I've seen orthopedics and family medicine people use OMM as a massive lever for anatomy and fundamental understanding of the human body in a different way than MD counterparts. We've seen IMG students leverage like global and cultural awareness and having rotated and worked as a doctor abroad and things like that. There are all these interesting angles to take if you want to take them. You definitely do not have to, right? But they can be used, and they certainly should not be used negatively, right? You shouldn't never perceive these things as negative aspects to your training, and certainly not writing about them as such either. Now, we live in a world of advancing technology, and AI is like a huge part of it. I think this talk is not anyone who's talking about writing in 2026 and not talking about AI tools is kind of not addressing an elephant in the room. Ian, I know you and I, we talk about AI all the time as it applies to medicine and to writing and to kind of the landscape of applications. Like, if a student is thinking about using AI, where, like, do they start with AI? Do they not use it at all? Do they use it in the middle? Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to be the student who, like, this is my story, make me a personal statement, and then submit that, right? It's not even about whether or not you get caught for doing that. You're going to have an objectively bad statement. Pure AI writing does not read well. It does not read authentic. I think everyone has like read an article online and like one paragraph had been like, oh, this is AI generated. Because like, I mean, often you can tell the human voice is something that is a little bit hard to replicate, but that doesn't mean that you can't save yourself time or make yourself more effective. Not all of us are like the best writers. I mean, that's not why all of us went into medicine. Some of us have a lot of experience and are really great at it. But yeah, like the slide says, I think brainstorming, like these are some things that I think I want to talk about. How would you structure this personal statement? And then you go and you write from there. This is like a paragraph that I wrote, or this is a sentence I wrote. Can you help me give some ideas about making this like turning this into a better hook, make this more attention grabbing, and then take elements from that. Take elements. Don't necessarily take the whole thing and be like, oh, I see what it did there. I'm going to like revise my paragraph or my sentence accordingly. I think use it sparingly. I can only talk from my experience at my program. I mean, like PDs do use AI detectors. I think that people know that they're not super reliable. I don't think it's really about whether or not you get caught. I think it's about if you use AI the wrong way, you're going to end up with a subpar statement. You're going to be in that 80% probably. I don't think the AI will put you in the bottom 10% very likely, but you're definitely not going to stand out.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And I also think that um, context is super important, right? Like if you're using like a Chat GPT or any of like the generic free AI tools, like they don't have the same context that like any person who's like a doctor, a resident, like your faculty at your school, like they don't have that context, right? So like it can use the web, but really like the web is pretty limited in the context of residency personal statement examples that are really good. Like that, there's actually you could put it into Google or AI right now, you will not find many examples of like stellar personal statements that AI can use to make yours better, right? I think that's an important thing to mention. The other thing is that it's an excellent proofreading tool. I think proofreading, idea generation, I think that's fine. Writing, I would kind of just tread caution with like any like long format writing with that for like a high stakes document. Again, smaller stuff, sure, many of us are using it, and that's okay. But yeah, I think this is just an important thing to address. And if you guys have questions, by the way, about this slide or anything else, you can just drop it in the chat. We'll get to it either during the talk or we'll save it for Q&A after. All right. So another question that we got a lot of is what happens about, customizing my personal statement? And also what do I do about dual applying? So dual applying, you need two separate personal statements, right? You have to do it. And it's very important. You can't apply to radiology and internal medicine and have the same personal statement, obviously, right? You need to demonstrate that. The other thing is customization, which I think a lot of students ask about every year. Here's my golden rule of thumb. Customizing a personal statement for like top 5 programs is totally fair game. I just think you have to have like a compelling reason to do so. So I think it's hard to customize a statement to a place that you're just kind of like randomly applying to, you have no connection with, you never rotated there, you never did research with anyone there, you don't know any of the residents. Like I think it's a long shot. You could try, but it's like it becomes like less compelling. I customized my personal statements for every place that I did an away rotation at, and I had I was there for a month. Like I knew the people, the program, I knew like how I would fit in. I knew the things that I loved that would add to my training and my career, and I was able to communicate that. And I thought that was that's what I've been doing for all the students that I worked with since then, and I think that works really well. Oscar, yes, tell us.
So this year or this past cycle, I noticed that a lot of the applicants were submitting custom, like why my program. And it was very awkward because they never rotated there. They weren't even from there. And it just reads really awkward, and we can tell that you're just forcing a connection that's not there. So as Dan is saying, unless you actually have a genuine connection, you've actually did an away there or anything, then explain why you want to come to this program. Otherwise, we will know.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some specialties that last cycle started doing like an additional component with like specific, like extra questions. So anesthesia, neurosurgery, plastics were doing this. I have a feeling that more specialties will do it this cycle. So be on the lookout for that. And we'll send you guys an update, once we have it announced in writing. But like, I think as we move more towards like different fields getting like more kind of a little bit of their own flavor to the application, the personal statement, becomes more of like this, like, what do you want every program to know? And then, you can send specific messaging to specific programs as necessary, right? I think, explaining subspecialty interest is another question that we got is like, if you want to go into family medicine, but then you want to do sports, or if you want to go into diagnostic radiology and you want to do, breast imaging, same thing for surgery. You want to go to general surgery, you want to do, colorectal, right? Whatever the subspecialty is. I think it's okay to mention. I think the bottom line is that programs, residents, people who are reviewing the application, we don't want someone who's like too set in their ways. A very desirable trait in a future resident is someone who is malleable and who is open to learning everything, and someone who's not going to ignore things that they have no interest in, because like residency training is broad. I can speak to this myself. Like I'm an interventional radiology resident, but I do a ton of diagnostic training. And is it my favorite thing? No, but I have to learn it and I have to perform at the same level as my peers. And it would just be really bad to have someone in a program who like blatantly ignores that like a massive component of their training just because they think they're never gonna, they don't want to do it. So I think these are just things to just keep in mind with like the wording of how you say certain things, how you mention certain anecdotes, how you mention career plans. Because I think mentioning, very few students, and this is something I love seeing like forward thinking personal statements, statements that start in the past and end in the future. To me, that like trajectory is like, it's very logical, it's very appealing. And I also just love to see how people think about their career in a hopefully creative and novel way. And it's cool when people talk about like, hey, this is what I can see myself doing 5-10 years from now. You don't have to lock yourself into a subspecialty though to do so, right? You could talk about, wanting to be a teaching faculty. You could talk about wanting to be a researcher, et cetera, but you don't have to necessarily say, I'm going to for sure be a breast surgeon at this hospital. You know what I mean? You don't have to do that. So just keep that in mind too. Oscar, did you raise your hand again?
Yes, I have a question. So oftentimes, like you'll see like editing, there's like one liner like, oh, I see myself being a gastroenterologist. I see myself, doing Pulm Crit fellowship. Is that a valuable space to incorporate if it's just one or two lines?
I think mentioning that without context and without any additional kind of support from like a prior story or research or other experiences that you have feels very out of place to me personally. It feels like you're just kind of, like assigning yourself to something. And again, it's going back, like it kind of feels like it feels like you might be the type to like not be as interested in other things. Unless you have like a super compelling reason. Like if Ian's friend, who is a neurology person, says like, I'm going to devote my life to MS research. Hello. Absolutely. Like that makes total sense. Right. But if like he didn't have that story and he just said that, it'd be like, all right, cool. But like, why? Where'd this come from? Why? What about the rest of the specialty? What about like the other like 50 different other neurologic things that you can be a part of? Like, you know what I mean? It feels.
Yeah, totally.
All right, cool. All right, so we're going to do a live personal statement editing example. So this is a sample that we actually got last cycle. We have 2 of these. So I want everyone to take a moment to read it, okay? And drop in the comments right now what you think works and doesn't work for this statement. And then you're going to hear, we'll go around and we'll kind of talk about things that we like, we don't like, what kind of advice we'd give. And then we'll kind of take it from there. So everyone take a second. It's a pretty short one. All right, so curious but very interchangeable. I like that. I agree. Vague. Okay. Okay. No hook. All right, remember, guys, this is an introduction, right? This is someone's first line. Good. So you guys are getting the idea, right? So this is not great. I think if Camry got this, well, she's not emergency medicine, but if she got this, and she'd be glazing over the rest of it, right? You're not getting her attention back. So
I think too, this is like, it looks so much like a Mad Lib where it's like insert specialty here, insert adverb here, and so I think those, you just gotta be very careful with that.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, Camry or Oscar, either of you, if you want to take it, like, your advice, this is a statement that comes across your desk. It's, it's early September, as these statements tend to come to us for editing a week before the deadline. And this person's like, hey, I need this edit done next week. What are you, either in the session or in the line by line feedback that we give, what are some of the things that you're going to tell them, like encourage them to like, how are they going to try to change this?
I think the big thing that I'm going to want to talk to them about is like a story, whether it's clinical to integrate into this first paragraph. Did you have a specific case during your second year that made you feel alive in this way? Or if we want to do a non-clinical example, were you on a sports team where you had to fulfill a lot of different roles, or were you did something in undergrad that kind of had a similar sentiment? So that way it at least catches my attention a little bit more. And then we can use that story, like we've been talking about, to kind of lace together all of the rest of the paragraphs. But we would need to definitely figure out something that makes this applicant a little bit more unique than the Mad Lib.
Yeah, I totally agree. Ian, anything else you kind of encourage them to think about?
Yeah, I mean, just like that first sentence. So I'm interested in emergency medicine in my second year of medical school when I was exposed to a wide variety of clinical cases. What cases? What case got you interested? Tell me about it. Like, tell me that story. That would show me instead of telling me how that got like kind of got your interest there. There's a complexity of diagnostic reasoning and the ability to manage patients with multiple comorbidities quickly and efficiently. Okay, tell me about when that happened. Don't just like show me. And it's not even like you need to tell the story and then say this after. If you tell the story good enough, it's evident, and you don't need to like explain line by line all of these things. You can maybe take some of these words and put them at the end when you're tying everything together, like summarizing things. This is more of a summary. I mean, it's not even like badly written. It's just like a summary. It's not like an introduction. It's not really unique. It's not a story. So those would be my comments.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the other thing that I want to put a like really hard pin in is that don't forget the person reading the statement is already doing the specialty for years, oftentimes decades, right? Like we're all like a little bit more green or a little more junior. Most of the people reading these are like 10 plus years into doing the field, like never describe their job to them. I think it's like a huge pet peeve. Don't describe the job to me from like a point of like, where you're like a more junior to me. Like it's just like not a, don't do that. I'm not saying this specific sentence does that, but yeah, don't do that. Oscar.
I think too, going off of that is a lot of specialties, people like it for the same reason. People like family medicine because you have continuity of care, you see a wide spectrum of diseases. You don't need to tell me that. I already know that's why you probably like it. Give me something else. I know you like ER because it goes quick and you're efficient. Tell me something else.
I think Oscar had her hand up.
Camry just echoed what I is often my pet peeve is that people will put these generic reasons behind like why I am. And I'm like, this could apply to surgery. This could apply to family medicine. What are like the nitty gritty details that attracts you to this field and make that specific? Because this could apply, like if you took away emergency medicine, you could put internal medicine, you could put family medicine. It would literally apply to every single field.
Yep. You could literally put radiology into this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll just say one more thing. I mean, it's kind of in the same vein. A lot of med students do this by accident because you have less exposure to the specialty. So when you learn a little bit about the specialty, you kind of get the broad strokes of why you like it. And then when you talk about it, sometimes you accidentally talk in cliches or like things that are actually kind of annoying to people from the specialty. And talking about cliches or even like mentioning them, even if you're like trying to dispel them or play off of them, sometimes doesn't like come across the right way. So when you're talking about radiology and you're like, oh, I was in the dark reading room not talking to anyone else, but there's nowhere else I'd rather be. It's like that just doesn't like come across quite right. There's actually a lot of patient interaction in radiology. You do a lot of image guided procedures. You have to talk to patients on the phone. You have to talk to clinicians on the phone. There people come to the reading room and talk to you. So it's like when you're like, even if you're working on like playing off of the cliche, it still doesn't always come across quite right. That's why it's really important to have someone in the specialty actually read your statement, because as a medical student, even if you have other med students read it, you don't kind of know that nuance and how it's kind of coming across. If you can really like get an advanced understanding of the specialty and then like talk about it in like a really nuanced way, that's a little bit different, but that takes a lot of work and usually help from someone within the specialty to strike that right tone.
Yeah, 100%. We ended up taking this into like the direct example. I think Cameron mentioned this right away. It was like, tell me about the situation versus just giving the generic phrasing. So we went in with this intro um, from a case that the student was able to come up with from their ER rotation. Again, this is just, this is like taking something from very, very drab to something at least that has a storyline. And like, I want to know a little bit more about how you handled this, right? I mean, the situation itself, again, going back to our earlier points, it's not so novel, right? If you've rotated in the ED, this is a pretty standard situation in the ED, right? But at least I want to know, what did you do, right? Like, okay, you were in this chaotic situation that does happen to everyone. Okay. and how did you handle it? Or like what arose, what challenges arose, and what value did you bring to the team? And that's exactly what we built off of, was like what the student did, you know, the kind of situations that happened with all these patients, and basically the whole statement was weaving in this clinical situation with other experiences they've had, and then tying the loop in the end about why emergency medicine was the best fit for them. So we're going to do another example real quick. This is actually a closer, okay? This is a radiology personal statement closer. So everyone take a moment, and then we'll do the same thing. But yeah, I want to let us know what you guys think in the chat about, is this an effective closer? What's missing? Let us know your thoughts. Okay, doesn't tie back to the hook, feels generic. All right, okay, I agree. So yeah, we don't know what the hook was here. I agree. It describes the role. It describes the job, which we already talked about. We don't like that. Feels like a list. Right. Too many ideas, right? There's a lot of room for improvement, right? I'm not walking away with a grand slam, juicy kind of like high end of who you are and what you bring to the table. I do think that this is like, you could put anyone's name on this and it could be a closer for virtually anyone. The only thing unique here is maybe like the electrical engineering and cross country. Like that is probably unique to the applicant, that most people probably don't have that exact intersection of experiences. But everything else, like I'm not understanding why those matter, right? You're like many people said, they're just kind of listing it off. And I think the feedback that I would give is, tell me exactly what each of the things that probably, and I'm assuming because they're in the conclusion, right? Again, right now we don't have the rest of the statement, but if you get this kind of a closing paragraph, what you're thinking about is you probably mentioned these things, right? If you didn't mention these things and now they're in the closer, we have a lot of work to do. We're like, we have to talk. We have a long conversation to have. But you probably talked about these things throughout the statement, and that's why you're trying to tie them in at the end, but you're not doing a good job at it. What I'd rather see is a direct correlation to exactly how each of these things lend itself to radiology in a way that doesn't just list them. I don't know, Ian, what are your thoughts?
I totally agree. I think each of the things that they talked about are like valid, right? Like doing a collegiate sport is a pretty big deal. There's like a lot of discipline that you could probably translate into essentially any specialty. It is relatively unique to this applicant. And I think you should probably be talking about that if it's something important to you. So it's awesome that they did that. But like you said, Dan, how does that connect with radiology? Electrical engineering, okay, maybe you could see some connections there from technological aspects of radiology, or maybe even innovation that you want to like promote in the field, but like you're not saying that. So I think they probably talked about these things earlier. So call back to these vignettes that hopefully you were using earlier. What happened in college cross country that where you showed but did not tell that you had discipline? What happened as an electrical engineer that showed but did not tell that you had intellectual curiosity? And then call back to each of those vignettes, tie everything back together from the whole statement, as opposed to just compiling a list at the end.
100%. Yeah, and then we ended up kind of revising it very similarly to that, right? We ended up having them kind of tie in each of the unique skills to a specific aspect of the practice of radiology, but in a very unique way, right? We talked about, the engineer. This is actually my student from last year. Was really happy for her, master top choice. We talked about all these different experiences that she had that were very individually unique, and together, to have one person have all of them were unique. And then we really worked hard on making sure that they actually tied in to the practice, the day-to-day practice of radiology in a way that wasn't fringe and was still like, let people walk away with, okay, this person really has what it takes. And they really not only understand the field, but they understand how their experiences lend themselves to the field. All right, cool. So you guys got a little bit of a taste of what kind of editing would look like, and also what building a good statement would look like. And I wanted to chat with you guys before we open Q&A to everyone. Some of you guys are probably new to the platform. Some of you guys probably heard of us before, but our platform is all resident run, and this is all we do, is helping students navigate ERAS, personal statements, interviews in ways that honestly schools just kind of drop the ball on preparing students for. We have people in every specialty. This is just like a small sample of like, I would say some of my favorites, some of the people that have been on the team for a couple of years now. And, we work on like hundreds of statements every single year, mock interviews. We have tutoring for the boards, and we really just like do everything that we can to put students in the best position possible to optimize their match outcome, because honestly, a lot of this information is just not out there. And that's what we're here to kind of bridge that gap. Yeah, we've been doing this for 4 years now. So we've had over 1,000 students. We've had amazing results, and definitely have a couple of spots open for this cycle for both editing and advising. So if you guys are interested, definitely take a moment, scan the QR code. You could chat with us for free. There's a discount code on the screen as well. And also the Q&A is open. We're happy to answer any questions about personal statements, or if you guys have questions about writing for ERAS, we're here for you to kind of make sure that you feel comfortable leaving this room with the tools that you need to optimize this kind of really high stakes part of your application. So yeah, thanks for joining us today. And yeah, we'll kind of round robin the Q&A as you guys put them in.
Yeah,
got a couple of questions.
I got DM'd a question, so I'm just gonna read that so we get that one out of the way. So they were wondering if we haven't had maybe as much exposure to a specialty as we would like. We know we want to do it, but for whatever reason, we were not able to get as much exposure at this point as we would have liked. How do you make the details in your statement stand out? For example, I'm interested in FM, and I'm interested in FM because of those reasons, like we said, the continuity of the care being that first point of contact. How do we spin these things if maybe we don't have as much exposure or as much of those vignettes as we would like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think hopefully you're going to get those in your sub-Is. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard for you to convince anyone of anything. And hopefully you have a sub-I in July or August or September, so you can throw in those vignettes later. I think you have to start off with writing about other stuff. I mean, there's really no other thing, or trying to tie in experiences from other specialties that relate to the field of interest, right? I mean, those are basically your only two options. Either, either you talk about non-medical things that tie into the specialty and how they make you a more desirable candidate, or you talk about other specialties and how they kind of tie in an adjacent fashion, because every specialty eventually crosses roads at some point, right? And so you leverage those kinds of experiences. That would be my advice, but really that would be still draft. And then once you go on the sub-I, get more of that in-depth exposure, that's when I would go and be like, okay, like let's try to fill in some gaps using what you've seen in the actual specialty itself.
And I'll also say that, like, it does not have to come from that specialty. There's going to be situations in which maybe your school does not have that rotation, and your exposure to that specialty, you're like pretty sure you want to do it. You've done maybe informal shadowing, all these other things, like, and then you don't get to do your sub-I in it until like a couple months before you apply. You might not feel like you have all the information that you need to write your statement, but a lot of the experiences you've had in medical school do translate across specialties. When I was in my radiology interviews, they always ask you, tell me about an interesting case that you had. And when they're asking a question like that, they're not asking what's like the most medically interesting case that you had. They're asking, show me something about you by talking about a case and how you approached it and how you handled it. And I would always bring up like cases from surgery, from medicine, despite being on like a radiology interview. Those can be awesome examples of showing characteristics about yourself. Maybe you saw a lack of continuity care on your ED rotation. Maybe you saw a lack of follow-up after, like, post-operatively on your surgery rotation, and you like knew that that wasn't the kind of physician you wanted to be. You can tie things in different ways and then maybe fill in those gaps when you get more experience.
Absolutely. We're getting a ton of amazing questions, and I want to get to at least some of these. We had a couple of questions about like working with the team. Just so you guys know, everything we do is specialty matched, including editing. And as of right now, we don't have any spots available for like just editing. We're only taking on students for the whole season. So full application support, interview prep, signal token strategy, program selection, like basically literally everything. If we have availability later on in the summer, we may open some spots at that point for just editing, but that is a TBD that we don't know if that will happen at this time. Some other questions. So discuss, what is your approach to discussing things like overcoming challenges related to mental health? So that's a great question. I appreciate you asking that. I think that it's a very underspoken topic. Like it's, people like it's taboo and people don't feel comfortable talking about it. I think that it's up to you how open you want to be. And I think there's a line, right? And the line that I would encourage you to consider is you don't want anything to be perceived as something that can be used against you. That's the number one thing. And I know that's really unfortunate that would even be the case, but you don't, that's just something that's just a reality that I want to be super transparent with you about. So if it's something that's like in the past and dealt with and, kind of just something that's a formative part of your story that molded you into the person that you are today and has given you a different perspective on the world, I think that's super relevant and should be talked about. I think that if it's not, I would be a little bit careful with how you word it. And I think, if you feel free to ask me follow-up questions or send us an email, we could talk about it. But I think that's kind of that's the line that I would think about. Another question, how do you balance, I love this one. How do you balance studying for the boards and drafting the personal statement? Well, first of all, you're doing the right thing because you're on this call. So that's step one. Step two is, it's kind of like an in tandem thing. You don't need to have a full draft by June, right? Applications are due in September, okay? If you got to give the school something so they get off your back for a little bit, that's okay. Put something together, acknowledge that it's probably not going to be your best work or your final work, and just keep on going and keep on adding to it, keep on working with people, getting feedback, iterating on it over the course of the summer once you're done with the test. So a totally reasonable question. I think Oscar wanted to add something to that, maybe.
Yes, I would say I was also one of those people that was kind of in a bind on what to write exactly. And I dual applied internal medicine and psychiatry. I sat down and I basically wrote exactly like what my future self looked like if it was either internal medicine or psychiatry, and what qualities or like characteristics I found myself appreciating in residence that I wanted to emulate on my personal statement during my rotations. So it was like just being a thorough person, being detail oriented, being able to like break down simply things for people that were complicated. You just kind of have to reflect a lot. And that's how you get your personal statement going. It's like maybe you start with an outline and then kind of piece things together. The hook, I think, comes last for some people, or some people just like start with a hook. It all depends, but just having a genuine reflection will help create a genuine piece.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Another good question. Would it look bad to use a very similar version of my personal statement for residency applications as a VSLO? I think a lot of you guys are probably thinking about this. If you apply to away rotations, you had to submit a personal statement. What I always tell like the students that we work with is like VSLO statement is like V1, lower stakes. It's usually very short. It's very program specific. It's kind of like your warm up, right? It's like you're just getting used to this whole thing. No one's really like, they're kind of like reading it for different things, right? Than the real personal statement. I think it's totally fine if that serves as the backbone or framework from which you build upon and iterate upon. But definitely don't, again, unless your VSLO statement was perfected to the point where you're like, I have nothing else to add, even though I've lived 9 months of life since I wrote this, then sure. I mean, that's probably not going to be the case for most people though. So that's kind of what I would say there. So I think there was anything else. I think we answered a bunch of them in the chat, which is great. Anybody else have any other questions? We covered a lot of stuff here today. Give you guys an opportunity to ask one or two more before we round out the hour. Working with us, you could we'll send you guys links to kind of explore everything on our website as far as like what working with us would look like, because we have like different options for students. And one last question. Here we go. When customizing to each program, editing a base, just edit the last paragraph. That's right. Good. The last paragraph is just there's the only thing you need.
That would be so much work.
Yeah. Do not revise the whole thing. But yeah, no, thank you guys for joining us. Thanks to the panelists for your time on this evening. It's like awesome. I think it was a great conversation covering a lot of high yield things. And yeah, reach out to us if you guys need help, and we'll see you at the next event. All right. Good luck, everyone.